Season 1, Episode 2 of the Northeast Cannabis Podcast. This is for Respect My Region's North American Weed Tour. And I have here, honestly, two guests. They really don't need an introduction. If you know anything about weed, music, culture, the city, you know about Honeysuckle Magazine. How you guys? We got Sam, we got Ronit. How you doing?
Good.
How are you?
Excellent. So I'd be remiss if I didn't invite you to Toke. I'm going to. So completely up to you. But you guys keeping cool in the city right now? It's a scorcher.
Yeah, we've actually had a really great spring and summer. We've everybody's been having these massive problems, and the city's been strangely perfect. So I'm not going to jinx anything, but yeah, it's been really nice here. So.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm seeing you guys everywhere when it comes to New York and tri-state cannabis, and that's super exciting. That's something I would love to literally delve right into, which is the localization of some of your stories. I think that's blowing a lot of cannabis media out of the water, and it's such an important boots on the ground scenario.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. It's it's interesting because obviously we've started in New York. Our cannabis content began in actually our living room. We're in New York, so we have a 1-bedroom apartment. So we were covering underground, right, taboo stuff at first. I mean, we started Honeysuckle in the basement of basically a warehouse basement in Detroit, where we were living at the time. And then we came to New York. I continued it while working in film. And then in 2017, 16, we got into cannabis. We just met Ronnie DeSoto and Josh from, at the time, Canna Gather. And there wasn't really anything happening, you know what I mean, in terms of an industry.
It was activists in the beginning.
It was activists. And then we were invited to rooftop sessions and you know what I mean, real little things. And then we had Leo Bridgewater and Kim B and about 7 or 8 people, and then most of them were not Anglo-American white people, and so they were very much explaining the war on drugs and the 13th Amendment and just all this stuff about race. And since then we've been very boots on the ground, I feel like.
Absolutely. And I mean, one thing that really resonates with me is the content will cover things shout out Best of New York, for instance, that, I really like that. I would call it localization, but it's more than that. It's important because it's not stuff that shows up in most, it's not frontline stuff, it's not burned around the cover of Forbes. It's not, maybe some of the sexiest stuff, but it is really certainly some of the most compelling. So you started in Detroit, did I hear you say?
Yeah, I personally, so Sam and I met on a film set, so we both have a background in film. And then I have a background in media as well, and I was a publisher's assistant for a print publication there. And I just whatever that third eye chakra is, right, that my creative mind just blew up, and I would have images and film ideas and things like that. And I just couldn't get over it, the love that I had for visual storytelling that goes, for film too. And so we were working in film, and then I actually had, it was almost a weird vision of Honeysuckle. And I, based on everything else that was going on at the time, I just went for it because I believed in it and kind of saw certain things that it could be, and yeah, that was in Detroit, and Sam helped make the first video and has been pretty much there from day one.
Yeah. So I mean, we started in Detroit, and then it was when we came to the city that we kind of rededicated things to cannabis. This was 2017. At the time, I was working with an actor named Alan Cumming, and you'll know him from GoldenEye, as well as other things. So we were hey, you know what I mean? We're thinking about doing this, issue, themed issue dedicated to cannabis. Would you be cool? And it ends up that he's been a really big.
Well, first we were like, Sam, can you get an interview? Like we're in her living room, and we're like, Jamie, our editor at large, was there, who's been instrumental since day one, and we're like, can you get an interview with him? And then we're like, did he do the cover? And then the next thing we know, we're like shooting him in infrared photography, like while he's smoking a joint. And that was like, and then he let us have our launch party there. And that was like, all the New York cannabis community came out. It was super fun. The people that were there at the time, like everyone was smoking weed with like weed sunglasses. Cool.
Yeah.
What year
And that was 2017.
Okay. All right. I said boots on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were absurdly early. To
the point where like there's no ad doll. Like we're gonna get ads. We're gonna do it. And then it's like,
I mean, I feel like it's kind of like similar to like psychedelics now, where it's like, everybody wants to engage in that space. And then it's like, oh, you got to look for sponsorship or ad dollars. And you're like, well, okay, there's no companies. You know what I mean? So we were in a similar position back then when it was all legacy operators.
It was also because like we weren't combining cannabis and mainstream like we do now, but like even just 3 years ago, that was like mind-blowingly hard for people to understand.
For sure.
I don't know why, but like they're like, this isn't cannabis, I can't, or they're like, this is cannabis, I can't. So
yeah, and that still definitely like it exists to this day. You know what I mean? Like talking to like endemic and non-endemic brands, you know what I mean? Like there's still a lot of people who that's not clicking for. And that was especially apparent. So, we split the magazine into 2 different publications. So, Honeysuckle continued to be Honeysuckle, working in more of the cultural space, and Honey Pot was formed. Great name.
Okay.
And did a couple of issues, had the D'Angelo's on a cover, Laganja Stranja, we were still doing the same, super visually engaging, stylish, publication.
Yeah. And then the MRTA passed and we were like, yes.
Yeah.
Cause it just had this bizarre, and for those of us who've been doing this in the city for so long, like the immediate impact of the MRTA that had on everyone, and like spending and just freedom and just overall like pliability was like really cool to witness.
All right, well, so you guys have really, and that's something I was speaking to the last guest, Jeffrey Hoffman, and he was talking about how like seeing everything progress in New York. I mean, I didn't share this, but that's kind of the trippiest part, right? So I went to high school, middle school, you name it, like in Manhattan, like when we smoked that blunt, like during lunch in 8th and 9th grade, and we heard like, boop, boop, like we ran for fear of actually going to jail. So it's fascinating to see. It's not just fascinating, it's certainly heartwarming, but I'll be honest, like, 420 in the city in Washington Square Park. I mean, I had some PTSD going on there for sure. I mean, this is the same places that, going to jail for 10 years, you get caught smoking, right? And then, it's wild to see that. And I guess it's important, now that I say it out loud, it's important for people like you to preserve or to tell these stories as they happen, and to serve as like a what's the word? A record, if you will, for the young ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, someday, we're going to know people in our lifetime who won't know that weed was illegal. I mean, at some point you're going to turn to someone and they're going to be like, wait, this was illegal?
Yeah.
You're going to hear that at some point in your lifetime.
Well, we already
10,
hear
20
it.
years.
Yeah. Like some of our Black interns, like young interns, even if they're Black and not, they don't know about the war on drugs, which I found fascinating. You know what I mean? They're like, and maybe it's like an economic thing if they're, didn't ever deal with that or weren't around it. But like, that was kind of surprising to me that like Gen Zs or like some 20-year-olds just aren't even really aware of that history.
Oh, certainly. And, it used to be a thing where it was like loose lips sink ships, right? So my dad's like famous saying is like, everyone says it. And now it's quite the opposite. In fact, this kind of harkens back. This is actually a poignant question, I think. So knowing that there's like a delicate balance, of course, between, and you guys walk it every day, between talking about and teaching people about the counterculture and sort of things that are not necessarily legal and, wanting to, meaning, so, okay, I struggle with this daily, wanting to shout the loudest, but then having to kind of remember, well, some stuff maybe we shouldn't shout super loud about. So, how do you walk that line of, when it's drowned out in gray markets and this and the, and, regulation, non-regulation? Is there like a delicate dance you do when telling stories?
I mean, I'll speak for my, like, personally, like, so it's funny, the biggest stigma actually that we've dealt with is more in sexuality, believe it or not, than cannabis even. Like, I feel like sex is just like people freak out. Cannabis people freak out. Everyone freaks. So that's, and it's so taboo, and anyone who's puritanical in any way, which most of this country is based on, it's just like very threatening. So that's been like the most complicated. And in terms of cannabis, like, I think we both, just being from Detroit probably, and kind of DIYers, like, resonate with legacy. Like, we were never been white collar execs, you know what I mean? We've never, like, we've done most substances at some point or another, like, so that's going to be like who we probably be around with naturally. But I think, like, in terms of that fine line, it's more up to the operators, because, like, I've had people say, we're not doing press right now because of the licenses and stuff. Otherwise, like, for us, it's just a story, right? It's a story like anyone else's.
Yeah, but I mean, I also think that, like, from behind the scenes, I mean, I don't really impact editorial. I mean, I'm more in the creative world. But I mean, there's some things that are very obvious, like full decriminalization of all drugs. You know what I mean? And sex work. Okay. Day one. You know what I mean? These are things that are super, super duper apparent. I mean, I know we also live in a world that just overturned Roe v. Wade, so we're a ways from what I'm describing. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm not, ashamed to say that out loud. So when people have these stories about how psychedelics are changing lives, you know what I mean? How, like how cannabis is changing lives. Like, we're all about, like, normalizing.
What's your experience like in terms of that fine line? Like, is it the taboo, or like what?
It's funny because, like, as I said, as someone who comes from the legacy or traditional market, I often will find, like, Instagram, I find to be like a very like a hilariously inverse thing for me, because it'll be like, yo, I'm the snitch, right, on myself. Like, I'm the one talking about, so but I mean, what I mean to say is, it's such important work, I think, storytelling in a difficult space and in a scenario where, I mean, like, this is geopolitical at this point. We have a WNBA player, being traded for a weapons trafficker, and, like, we have action. So, meaning, it's painting the landscape, cannabis is, regardless of whether or not people want to accept it. It has always been painting the landscape. And I think that like kind of goes back to, you said you come from a traditional, when you say traditional, I mean, probably fairly corporate, at least corporate creative, right? So, like, what was some of your background before cannabis? And it seems like you did it really seamlessly,
Well, I've never been like exec or corporate. I'm definitely more of a creative background. So I did, after college, get a quick stint in accounting because I happen to be good at math. But, like, and they were like, they wanted to send me to get, like, my PhD and, like, stay, and I ended up, like, going to Israel and lived there, and that's where I started writing, actually, and got more into the arts. And I was like, this is definitely more my track. And anyone who's creative knows how hard, like, coming out of the closet as an artist or a creative is really hard. You know what I mean? So that was like a whole nother thing. But other than after that, yeah, it was a lot of freelancing. Like, I wrote for Allure magazine as their beauty writer, freelance. We got into film work, and that actually paid. I mean, we were crew members, so, like, humping furniture and, like, doing pyro. We weren't like producers or something. But it paid really well because it was a union gig. And then that's how I was able to kind of start Honeysuckle, because I actually had a paycheck. And then, as a freelancer, as you know, paychecks are not
easy to come by. Yeah, no, for sure. And that's kind of what, so I knew what I'm getting at is that I think that I often will bring this up, right? Like we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We have people from like there are industries that are established that know how to do certain things. And I'm a big supporter of learning from other industries than cannabis and bringing that shit into like honestly just like what you did. And I find that's why I asked the question. I find that some of the more effective people that I talk to in cannabis is, you know, sort of like just like both of you, where and just like me myself as well, where maybe we've had a deep rooted connection to the plant for many years, but there's still something to be said for real world experience, which I'm the first to say cannabis is a different thing than the real world. Sometimes it's harder than the real world, but it's not the real world.
Yeah, I mean, it's so complicated, like to be an operator or anything. I mean, you have, because it's federally illegal. I'm just preaching to the choir, but like even just hearing how it goes, I'm like, what? You have to deal with.
Yeah, but I mean, like in reality, you take some of these cannabis CEOs, right? This is federally illegal. We're a couple of political horse pranks away from not being able to yank CEOs out of their houses at 4 a.m. You know what I mean? Like if politically things swung super right suddenly again, you know what I mean? Like this is a federally illegal thing still. They can do anything they want, and just how ridiculous.
Oddly, I think the Republicans like are for the tax revenue. Right? Aren't they kind of like pro legalization?
No.
Well, what I've seen is that it honestly doesn't seem to matter if it's a Democrat or Republican who puts the bill up. It seems like 5-6 times a year for the past 5 years, we've had a scenario where they have put a bill up for the sole purpose of striking it back down. So I think of it more as like a call option on, I feel like being in cannabis and surviving with all this bullshit and putting up with it is like putting up a call option on the federal government opening up interstate commerce, meaning like it's just something that is going to happen. Obviously, there's a lot of, you know, fuckery. There's a lot of bullshit. You know, there's a lot of like, you know, Coke and Pepsi and pretend and posturing and pretending we're different. But it's going to happen. And when that happens, all bets are on, I guess.
Yeah, no, there would have been billions of dollars put into getting to that position. No, it's an exciting industry. I mean, it changes day to fucking day. You know what I mean? Like, so currently the situation in New York for our, you know, fair listeners, is there's all kinds of illegal dispensaries open everywhere. They popped up like mushrooms. And it's this strange kind of like libertarian dream where like in amongst them figuring out the rules, the market just came up and was just like, oh, bro, you want some pre-rolls from California? I got like 1 million of them. Let's open this. You know what I mean?
I do.
They're sophisticated too. We went into a couple of them. The artwork was really good. They had a smoking lounge in back. Like they're impressive.
So because you, as I say, brought the conversation there, I'm going to go there, right? So one of my fucking favorite topics, and honestly, it's what old people like us will remember from California, right? So after Prop 215, we had a glory period of like 6 years between then and when they were writing Prop 64, where it was simply unregulated. So we had what you well described as like a libertarian, you know, bizarre fever dream of in terms of that people thought would last forever. People were like, oh, like we're gonna be able to sell weed forever, just like this. No, of course. Then regulation comes in, then there are rules, and then no, you have to pay taxes, and so it's fascinating to have people who are now older and wiser who lived through that, who have brands who are saying, well, fuck that. We've seen the writing on the wall. We know exactly what's going to happen. Let's get on boots on the ground. Let's build brand equity in states like New York while we can, you know, and I honestly think it is one of the more admirable things to do. I mean, doing something first before it's quote unquote, you know, okay before it's right. I mean, I think that's an early bird gets the worm scenario. And I'm actually wondering what you guys think about the whole, all these cease and desists that are going out. And do you think they're going to play any part in the future? Do you think any of these operators, from your own experiences as, writers and journalists, do you think any of these operators want to be in the legal market? What's your thought?
Yeah, we've actually, I mean, we go and we talk to them in their stores.
Yeah. More than I do.
What?
Well, you definitely have more insight.
Yeah, I mean, so what I found, what's happening is like there's like OG operators here, like serious culture changers. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure I could say them, but whatever. And they what?
I wouldn't say that.
Okay, I'm not going to. But like they're in contact with the OCM and the like politics, like they're helping shape the laws, and they, from my understanding, do not receive those letters, because I think that there are viable businesses on the ground that like the government can see like they need, you know what I mean? New York State is like, oh, we probably need these people, there's revenue, there's this, there's that, and through the like equity laws they're trying to integrate them. Will they all, my question is like, are they going to make more money or less money after? Because I mean, honestly, that would fucking suck, excuse my French, to have to, you've been doing this for so long and now you have to like pay for, do all this stuff to make it legal. But like, I think that the little ones that are getting those, the pop-ups that are getting those letters, I don't know if they'll last, but like.
Yeah, I mean, so we've definitely talked to, some of the people who operate them, and they, kind of said, we're looking to go legit. We're trying to kind of use this maybe as like a footprint to grandfather into something. You know what I mean? But they expressed wanting to be a legitimate storefront. You know what I mean? That's what everybody wants. That's what commercial real estate in New York needs. It needs occupants. These places, great. They pay money.
But then the ultimate question is like, okay, so what point are the big MSOs going to come and just like wipe everyone out? If not MSOs, then like the government, you know what I mean? Big tobacco or big alcohol. And then like, I was just having this conversation the other day that, maybe it'll be like craft beers where you'll always have these like cool, cannabis options, but like there will still be this like mountain of mainstream sort of like Bud Lights cannabis. I don't know.
I think that there's definitely I think that's kind of what we all hope, and that's the best case scenario. What worries me is that craft beer model, it took 70 years to get to, it took so long. It's not like it, and of course everyone knows this. Of course, it's like we all simplify it kind of in our heads, and you gotta start somewhere for sure. What I was more referring to is, and this is something they tend to do in a lot of states, is attempt to bar those exact people that you were talking about, the real legacy operators, the real culture creators, by way exactly what we're talking about now, is saying, oh, well, you're operating during, an unregulated time, like that bars you from ever submitting an application. To which I always will respond to people like they should for sure have whatever business that is on the gray market and in a different name for sure, and not the same name you would use to apply for a license. But in general, it's just, there are landmines that like I always want to shout out, make sure people are, kind of aware of, or like, yo, just, this is not going to last forever. These are the glory days. We're living in them.
Yeah. No, it's rapidly approaching. I mean, and the opponents are large corporations and the literal government. You know what I mean? Like they're going to get squeezed as soon as those people want to squeeze them. Unfortunately. But yeah, that I don't see that surviving. I think that the street level stuff, like the pop-up tables that you see in like Washington Square or whatever, those are going to be there forever. Those are now a permanent fixture in New York City.
What
Congratulations. I don't know. It depends on how draconian they get with how they respond to that. Because clearly, if you're a multi-million-dollar funded business enterprise, which essentially you have to be one of these, store operators, or in any license, you know what I mean, like multi-million-dollar businesses, they're just not going to tolerate. I am paying like an absurd amount in taxes. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure, real estate's going to jack up the price because they're a cannabis thing, because they can, whatever, cannabis tax. So they're going to be paying out the nose for the ability to have a brick and mortar. And I think those people are going to be well heard from. You know what I mean? And what, your neighbor just doesn't pay any of that? Like, I think that's going to determine what happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, and well, so that brings me to an interesting question: is what can we do as journalists to? So this stuff is not new, problem-wise, right? Like we have this in Cali, we got these in a lot of states, these issues, right? So, I guess I always, maybe this comes from youthful naivete, but I like the concept of us doing what we do and potentially impacting the legislation in the rapidly legalizing states for the better. Meaning, if we just cover and talk more about the failures in California and really get to the nitty gritty of why why this is a failure. Like I feel like there are a lot of people who don't understand the concept of like, the cultivation tax repeal not being the same thing as why they're paying a buttload of taxes at the dispensary level.
I mean, I think it's easy for me to simplify. Is that the people who didn't want legalization got their claws into these laws and they made it as painful as they possibly could. Like
it's a Schedule 1 drug.
But yeah, you assholes are gonna get your weed, but we are gonna just ruin it. Mm-hmm. And I can't find any other answer more simple than that. Nixon,
right? We had like sociopaths like making laws on like stop and frisk and like psycho drug laws that are very harmful and like murderous. But in terms of journalism, I think it's a good question. You know what I mean? Like how much. I think my personal goal is like the more I hear from just like the operators, like hearing their wants, because like where we might be like, yeah, we're going to fight for this and that. Some of them are like, I'll sell, you know what I mean? Someone can license my brand. I'll walk away with millions of dollars, you know what I mean? And they might be okay with that in a burgeoning industry, as long as like them and their family are taken care of. Because that's basically why a lot of people do it in the first place, right? They need to make a fucking living because of our economy. And it doesn't work for everyone. So it's like, I think if people can walk away with an economic stability, then that might be okay for some of these people, even though they've been doing it for so long, even if it's not in cannabis or, operating.
Well, very true. But then, I guess maybe the skeptic in me comes up and says, well, 100%, but who's going to say, hey, legacy person, you want to license that brand? Don't worry, give 51% to this private equity hedge fund, and you got yourself a deal. Well, the landscape is filled with these predatory models. So I guess I just mean there needs to be, there's and it's always me like, pooping on the parade, like, but just like because I'm with you on all of it. It's just such a, it goes to a point of, I think real equity, as an example, would be, I'm going to give an equity license to someone. I'm also going to make sure that they know how to run a business. And there's going to be mandatory, classes that, basic accounting, this and that. And so I almost feel like, again, sort of like, somebody alluded to, a lot of this is set up to fail in the sense of like, all right, we'll give you your weed, but we're going to ruin it. I really like how you said that.
I mean, I could not operate a cannabis business. There's no way. You know what I mean? Like, I think, it's going to be completely different than what they've been doing. The models and the things that you have to do. So, I don't know.
Yeah. And it always seems like it's the biggest companies that are making like the most money. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these dispensaries and a lot of these companies, it's paycheck to paycheck, or, like it's
But that's why, like, cannabis is such a microcosm, and, like, why it pretty much took over our content, you know what I mean? From being, like, underground taboo to, like, cannabis. Because it is. It's, like, literally in your face, like, equity, economic disparity, race, you know what I mean? Like culture, like all of the things that you would talk about in a media, for me at least, in media or in a publication, like art through the lens of cannabis, like very acute. So it's like tragic, right? And like heartbreaking essentially what's going on. I don't think anyone really knows the end of the story, but at the end of the day, it won't only be cannabis. Like a loss for like the cannabis industry is just a loss for the world. You know what I mean? Because it will just show that inequality still prevails, or, you know, economic disparity and poverty or whatever. Like it's just a sign of like something larger. So probably our motivation is for like better in a macro sense, you know what I mean? But we're like dealing with it through cannabis. Does that make sense?
100%, because in fact it's like what I do every day, but said well, you know. Yeah, absolutely. I think that cannabis makes those these issues extremely acute and obvious, and that's well said for sure. No, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, you could almost be cannabis agnostic if you wanted to, and just look at like the ancillary issues that it brings up. It holds a lens up to, you know, systemic racism and what that concept is. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think it's at the core of it.
Environmentalism, economics, geopolitics, you name it. No, absolutely.
Yeah, no, it really just like the way that I describe it in the elevator pitch is, you know, cannabis is the hub, you know, to like a wheel. Like the spokes that come off from it are the sex and psychedelics and racial politics and, you know, all these kinds of issues that surround cannabis. It's just this really intense lens on our country.
Sure. I mean, it's plant medicine too, so we didn't even talk about like the historical or like the religious ceremonial aspects, you know, that completely don't even exist in America. You know, there's a lot, yeah, to get into.
Definitely. So what's the future for, I mean, look, I think the future is bright for cannabis for sure. And if anything will fix these things, it will be that plant. I have no doubt. But what's next for Honeysuckle? What's on the horizon?
Well, you know, I mean,
yeah. Well, we're coming out with our, you know, our fall issue. We just got done shooting our cover artist, Mellow Rax, the other weekend in Miami. So that's coming up. We've got a party, launch party for that we're planning.
Yeah, at the box. I mean, overall, like, I think that, you know, media, as like, I think video, film, we're doing documentaries, like covering, you know, war on drugs in different capacities. And you know, we'll see what happens like with the print mag, or, you know, we do out of home billboard stuff, so we've always got that stuff going. But I think at the end of the day, we'll always be telling stories in a medium, whether that's print, digital, video, film. But yeah, like Sam said, we're in the immediate future coming out with our next issue. It's fashion, art. We've got some really cool stuff, like mainstream meets kind of like legacy underground stuff. A sexy event at the box. We're media partners for the NCIA Best of 420 Awards at the Clio's and NJ Unpacked. Are you gonna be there?
What's the date?
September 29th in Vegas.
Don't tempt me.
Yeah, you should pop in.
I should.
And then we'll see. I mean, we'll go to Hall of Flowers, hopefully, and just kind of like, you know, I think for us, it's merging mainstream with like plant medicine and all that like entails.
It's a line that you guys walk very elegantly. And I mean that, like, it's nuanced. There's a nuance to it. Like I always tell people, like, always be like people. In fact, maybe this is a good, you know, question to kind of end with, because I'm sure you guys get it constantly. How do you get in? How do you work in cannabis? How do you get into right? And so for people who, at least myself, very much included, I am like the definition of an ancillary operator, you know. So I say just come and do it, right? But I'd love to, if we could give the listeners, you know, some actual, you know, advice from you two.
Well, my advice is just hold on tight. Like, I think any business if you're not any entrepreneur or business owner, like it's gonna be crazy, right? And it's very risky, and there's a lot of challenges, and like every day is different. So I would just say, like, if this is what you want to do, hold on tight and just be very aware and learning all the time. It's not like a static, like, I'm gonna go to school and do this. It's very dynamic.
Yeah, well, but I would also say that this is one of those industries where if you want to put on your big kid pants, you know what I mean? Like, you can get somewhere. I've talked to 28-year-old CMOs of major companies. You know what I mean? Like, these are people who got on their grind in their early 20s in cannabis, and after a couple of years, they continue to go up in a way that you couldn't in any other established industry. So it's definitely a space of growth. You can be, you don't have to be like a huge head, you know what I mean? Like, to join the industry. Like, I know plenty of people who smoke occasionally, smoke sometimes. I consume daily, but I'm not out here like ripping dabs, brah. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a normal medicating throughout the day, while still, working 18 hours or whatever. Like, I think that you can come in and get into whatever it is you want to get into, because cannabis needs everything too. I mean, there's cannabis specific advertising, there's cannabis specific, tech platforms, especially with the federal bullshit. It's created a huge industries for working outside of it. One of our brand partners in the past, Philo, they do compliance, and it's granular down to the notes from local meetings on what those rules are. That's a business that exists because of all this regulation, and it's tech. So don't think you got to be out there trimming the actual plant in the field to work in cannabis. If you're into PR, if you're into distribution, there's armored truck companies.
No, you're absolutely right. I was just thinking, a piece of advice I've never given is like, yo, everyone, slide into your favorite brand's DMs, like annoy them, and like respectfully, of course, and like, just like for real, go work. Like, you'd be so surprised. How everyone's so used to giving up their working for free for an internship, and to pay your dues. But you'd be surprised how many cannabis companies would love to have you. So, for real.
Yeah.
So
for sure. Yeah.
You don't need to reinvent the wheel in the slightest bit. In fact, like, it's like you said, it's hold on to your hat, because it's a rapidly spinning wheel, but like, jump in, because that meteoric rise that can still occur in an industry like this is actually, yes, it's kind of second to none right now, I think. And that's frankly because we're at a real tipping point where it's like, this is what we all lived for so many years, and this is what so many people just coming online now are going to, are feeling. And this is actually, it's quite the momentous and exciting opportunity we all have for us. So come join us, everyone.
Yeah. One thing I will say too, before we close, is like, the stigma is so real still. So like, engaging even the like 20-year-olds, like our interns, again, they are so excited when we took them to Trailblazers, and they just being able to hear and listen about plant medicine panels and education was like revolutionary. Like, they hadn't been around that because it's not really part of our curriculum. So I think like continuing to talk about how it helps people, you know what I mean? Just how it helps you and everyone, like, it helps so many people that I think engaging the like younger generations in that dialogue and normalizing it for them is like gonna also really transform things on a larger scale.
Yeah, and I also think that normalizing, it's all about normalizing, where a friend of ours, Los Arias, describes it as ancestral medicine. And if you want to get on some real hippie shit, yeah, bro.
That's not hippie.
But what I'm saying is that I do choose to medicate with something that was around 10,000 years ago, that has a long history, you know what I mean? The longest history in human, pharmacology. You know what I mean? Like, we're finding dried mushrooms on people hundreds of thousands of years ago. This is a part of our DNA. And, if that's someone's medication, you want to take your Lipitor or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, this is the medication that I take. That's not a big deal. I'm also not getting high. I'm medicating. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of normalizing the kind of conversations that, we need to just have in everyday life with people, and just kind of like be firm in, like, the fact that, like, this is super legit and super important for humanity. That's the Trojan horse, man. It's the weed.
Yeah.
We're trying to improve the condition for fucking humanity over here. Lend a hand, legalize this shit. You know what I mean? Maybe before deciding to invade another, country that has done nothing to us, maybe smoke a joint. You know what I mean? Maybe rethink spending those billions of dollars on more missiles, or
that's why they don't
tanks
want to legalize
for the police, or you know what I mean? Like, this is going to have a positive effect on humanity to normalize and bring ancestral or plant medicine or cannabis or whatever into the world, and that's where a lot of people's passion comes from.
No, absolutely. Well said. And we're not going anywhere. Like, I don't know what else I would do. And I'm pretty sure you guys are the same. Well, it's such a fabulous honor to talk to you guys. It was so much fun. We partied hard in Petaluma and Sonoma. That was super dope. Shout out Sonoma Hills Farm. Shout out Compound. And yeah, definitely. I can't wait to do it again. And let's link up as soon as possible, guys.
For sure. Thank you for having us.
Amazing. Appreciate it.
Great talking.